Hey gang, your old buddy Clay here, Mountain Music Exchange, and this series of videos, the last one, this one, and with any luck, the next one, is going to talk about sort of the newer modern series guitars. Last video we talked about the Les Paul Modern Lite. So now we're going to chat it up just a little bit today about the Gibson Modern Studio. Okay gang, so I imagine that there are varying opinions on this guitar for a few reasons. One of those reasons is, this is going to replace the outgoing sort of traditional studio model that sort of had the traditional Les Paul appointments shape, except for a couple of things like push-pull pods and that sort of thing. To those folks, I say just remember the name Studio, right? So if you're in a studio, you want a guitar that is as versatile and as accessible as possible. But of course, if you're looking for that Gibson sound, you want that, and there's only really one way to sort of get that sound and that feel, and that is with a Gibson USA guitar. And this checks a lot of boxes. Quite frankly, even beyond the satin finish, replacing the outgoing gloss finish, that sort of thing. Again, keep in mind, studio sort of doesn't really matter as much when you think about it in that context, because you're going to be focused more on what you're hearing and what you're feeling rather than exactly what you're looking at. Although that being said, I do think these guitars do look great. But these have a lot of modern appointments, hence the modern in the name, right? You get the ultra lightweight modern weight relief here. And quite frankly, this doesn't feel much heavier to me than the last guitar that we talked about, the Modern Lite. And that guitar was substantially thinner, did not have a maple cap. And this has quite a few more appointments than both that guitar and the outgoing Studio. So let's talk about those. We will go from top to bottom. We'll talk about what this thing comes with as far as, amenities, accessories, cases, that sort of thing. And then last but not least, we will take it through its paces and play this thing for you guys to hear all the different sounds and things and feels. So for starters, let's start off top to bottom. Gibson headstock. You do get the Gibson mother of pearl inlay with that. So previous studios sort of had that gold silkscreen inlay. With this guitar, you do get the inlay that you think about with a standard or a more upscale Gibson Les Paul, and this has quite a few of those sort of hidden throughout. Of course, you get the silkscreen Les Paul model. You do get the standard sort of studio truss rod cover. You can also get a blank one that's included in the case as well if you want that. Just an overall good look. Now this has Grover tuners, but with the Keystone machine heads. So, your silhouette is still going to be that very classic Gibson silhouette on this guitar, if you think about it in that context. Also, this is something you would find on a Gibson Les Paul Custom, for example, Grover with the Keystone tuners. Now, one thing you'll immediately notice about this is these tuners aren't chrome, but they're not gold, they're not black, they're like a black chrome, so they've got a real shine to them, but they're still dark, and they just look really almost sinister. And the rest of the hardware is appointed that way as well. It is very rock and roll, very cool. Now, this is one of the more interesting parts to me, is the neck. And I'm not going to be able to show you what I want to show you here. I'm going to get you some close-ups of it though as we chat about it. This has a slim taper neck, very 60s sort of slim taper neck feel. This has an ebony fingerboard, but this does have binding. It not only has binding, it has binding all the way around the guitar. It's just black. So it's almost sort of this, when I say custom, I mean like a custom made guitar sort of spec, not necessarily a Gibson custom spec, although I'm sure you could probably still do that through Gibson's made to measure program. But it's bound all the way up and down. The previous studios were not bound. This is a bound neck and a bound body, and I'm going to get you close-ups of that in the best way that I possibly can to show this off. But it's very subtle, but it's also very cool. Satin finish here. This one's in Smokehouse Burst. You can also get that in like a satin white and a satin like a wine red. So a couple of, mostly traditional colorways for this modern studio versus the traditional studio. Pretty much almost the same set of colors on those, at least for now. And you also get an ebony fingerboard here. And not only is it ebony, it is a 12 to 16 compound radius fingerboard. So what that means is it starts out rounder here, gets flatter as you get closer toward the body, closer toward the pickups. And what that means is you can have insanely low action, and it's very comfortable to chord because it's still relatively round here. And then your bends can go as far as you could imagine as you want them to go, because it pretty much gets almost completely flat as you get closer to the body on this, which is super, super neat to me. And you can't really talk about the neck on this guitar without talking about this carve. It does have the modern sort of cutaway carve. It's not exactly as smooth as the Access carve. You can see there's still sort of a step here as you get to the body, so it's not the same, but it does offer unparalleled access compared to most other guitars sort of in this price range. And quite frankly, it gives you about the same level of access as an Access, but you do have that step there. You will feel it just a little bit, but it is very, very accessible. You can see I'm just holding this guitar up with one arm, one hand right there at that access point, and my palm is well below sort of the connector point of the body and neck. So just really cool stuff here. And you've also got Gibson's 490, 498 pickup here. Again, this is the same pickups that came in the last set that we talked about, the last guitar that we talked about, the Modern Light. Again, as long as they keep putting them in the customs, I'm going to keep saying them. These are not Gibson's lower end pickups. They keep coming in the custom. So if they're going to put those in that guitar, I think that says a lot about them standing sort of by this pickup and its versatility. You do have an Alnico 2 magnet here, probably middle 7-ish output, and you have an Alnico 5 magnet here in the bridge. That is like in the sort of 14-ish output, give or take. And again, you have that black chrome hardware here, just a rock and roll look. The more I even hold this guitar, I like it more the more that we sit here and chat about it, right? Now, your strap buttons do look to be completely just black hardware. They are the modern strap buttons, which I do prefer to the traditional. They flare out wider. They hold your strap better. Good strap buttons if you're not into like strap locks and that sort of thing. And you do have a mahogany neck here, one piece, and you have a mahogany body here. And with this one, you do get a carved maple top. So you get sort of all the right sort of Les Paul isms, all the right fixings for a Les Paul here, just with a ton of different appointments to sort of go along with that. And it's just really, really neat. Just, I like the way this looks, like sort of naked with no poker chip here, right? And really you get a full suite of electronic options here. So, you know, you get push pulls, so you can split over to single coil if you like. You also get like a phase switch, so if you want or need in a studio setting, or live for that matter, that Peter Green sort of flipped pickup out of phase sound when you're in that middle position here, you can bring that switch up and you will be able to achieve that sort of Strat-esque sound without any problems at all. And then finally, last but not least, I think this is one of my favorite things. If you aren't into using like a boost pedal, or you've got a drive pedal and you just need a little bit something extra for like a lead, for example, you can pull a switch here on the push-pull knobs, and this will directly bypass everything. This bypasses your bridge pickup. I'm sorry, this takes your bridge pickup directly to the output jack. It bypasses all of your other knobs and switches and just gives you pure, unfiltered signal. So if you don't like the fact that maybe a potentiometer is impeding your signal path, you might get just that little extra something for a lead, or that little extra something for a little extra bite, without having to maybe add a pedal or change, you know, the settings on your amp or something like that, you know. So this guitar is incredibly versatile, and it comes with a really nice gig bag. Now, I know when you read the specs and you say, oh, this just says a gig bag included, right? It is not the same gig bag as the days of old. You know, a gig bag used to mean like you just got basically a literal bag to carry the thing around in, right? So, you know, we talked about this a little bit in the last video. If you've not seen that, please go check it out. Also, let me just go ahead right now and just break for just a second and urge you to please like and subscribe. If you like the content we're putting out here, you want to see more videos, give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check us out. Other videos on the channel are readily available. We have done more than I imagined we ever would, quite frankly, and I'm really, really thankful for that. And so let's check out that gig bag now. So you get the Gibson modern gig bag here, and that is a really well padded gig bag. Like I mentioned earlier, the gig bags of old were just literal bags. You put them, they'd crumple on the floor like clothes, right? And so this is not the same scenario anymore. I mentioned this in the last video, but I would trust a much more expensive guitar than what Gibson ships to be in these bags and take a bump or a fall than I would the cases that some of their more expensive guitars come in, right? Not to say that those cases are dangerous, bad, they're not. They're very well protected, very stackable, very easy to, you know, travel with, that sort of thing. But just in general, right, a gig bag will sort of absorb, you can see like it absorbs impact, whereas a case may transfer it and may cause that dreaded thing that we all worry about, especially with our Gibson guitars, right? So this gig bag has really nice leather, and it has YKK zippers that are Gibson branded. The little Gibson logo is etched into each and every zipper on this, which I think is pretty darn neat. And if you're not familiar with like YKK zippers, what does that mean? If you're into fashion, if you're into handbags, you know, backpacks, anything like that, you know that YKK zippers are sort of like the gold standard of zippers, in that they're not prone to just sort of busting out or, you know, early failure breaking on you. You know, if you put too much stuff in here, you can still kind of clench it shut with the zipper. I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time, but you can do it with a YKK zipper most of the time. And the inside of this case is really nice as well. You get like this cool leather Gibson logo that's etched in here that I would love to have on a leather jacket, by the way. Just that you could throw over the neck. You get a nice padded neck rest that you can actually take out and move up and down. You know, if you sort of don't think the neck is sitting exactly where it ought to be. The padding, again, is very thick and very sort of, it's rigid, but in a gig bag kind of way, if that makes sense. And the material is very, very soft. The actual material here that you put your hands on, the outer layer here above this padding, feels a lot like the same type of material that you would feel in a Gibson hardshell case. So I think they've done a really good job of mimicking sort of their hard case like qualities while sort of putting that into a gig bag package. And I really, really like the leather. And again, the back of these, you can see here, you get like reflective stripes on here. You get that Gibson logo again. If anybody knows where you can find a jacket, let me know. And you get this cool like handle. You can just sort of pick the gig bag up like this if you want to pick it up and just kind of bring it over your shoulder to take it across the room or something like that. You don't have to always put on these straps, but even the straps are really well padded. The handle is really, really high quality. You can just feel it's like good and rigid, comfortable in the hand. Just a really cool gig bag if you're, you know, into traveling a lot. Don't be afraid. Don't let the spec sheet throw you off and say, oh, it's just a gig bag, right? It's really a pretty darn good gig bag if you're going to be getting a gig bag. So I guess at the end of the day, what we want to know is, like the last one and like every other video, does it sound good? Because all of these cool specs on a spec sheet don't mean anything if it doesn't feel or sound good. And this, by the way, feels incredibly good. You can't see the binding on here, but you can definitely feel it. And you can even see the nibs here. I'll get you a shot of those as well if I've not already showed you that. I'll show you the nibs here which is like sort of where the frets, the binding comes up over the fret sort of, and they have to sort of hand do all of that. If you've seen videos on how much effort it takes to bind a guitar, it will really surprise you that $19.99 is the price point for this. It is a lot of hand work and time and effort that goes into binding these guitars. So it's just, you know, it's interesting and also very cool that they've sort of hidden the binding, but also like they've bound the entire guitar at a lower price point than any other bound Gibson you're gonna find, period, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead. Actually, let's not go ahead just yet. And one last thing before we play is this is a Graphtec nut here. I didn't mention it in the last video and I dearly apologize, but the Modern Lite and the Modern Studio, these have Graphtec nuts here, and they are very good, sort of self-lubricating in that they don't really catch any burrs or anything that'll sort of hold your string up from natural travel, from bends, from tuning, etc. Right? So very cool stuff here. But without further ado, let's see what all these gadgets do. Let's hear how they sound. Let's give this a run for its money. Okay, gang, this is the Gibson Les Paul Modern Studio. I think it's a very versatile guitar. I think what you get for your money is worth it, especially when you look at the price difference between this and even the modern sort of standard counterpart, or even the traditional, unbound, or even the traditional sort of, satin finish counterpart. Even if you look at a traditional Les Paul 60s or 50s, for example, right? Those are $24.99. This is $500 cheaper. Essentially is appointed the same, even though it doesn't look quite as traditional or noticeable, especially when you're thinking about the binding being black here. That's a really good bargain. For this compound radius ebony fingerboard, ebony for under $2,000. Think about that. That was an impossibility just a few years ago. I mean, ebony on a $5,000 guitar was an impossibility just a few years ago. So now we've got ebony on a Studio, again, for the first time in over a decade. But a ton of appointments, very, very cool studio guitar, but quite frankly, it's just a very, very cool guitar to have at home or play out. These are definitely worth the difference in the price from the outgoing Studio to me. Even overlooking the satin finish, which I know some people now, because over time we've associated satin with being the cheaper version of a certain model, right? But when you think about it again in the context of a Studio, this really, really works and works well. So if you like this video, or you hated this video, or tell me what you like and don't like about this guitar in the comments below. Let me know, what do you think about the electronics? What do you think about the pickups, the hardware, the finish, the overall aesthetic, the price, everything? Let me know in the comments below, gang. I will be awaiting your comments so I can chat with you guys myself. And gang, without further ado, thank you all very much for watching. Like and subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. Check us out on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, check us out on TikTok, and check out Haas's short videos here on the channel. Gang, I'm Clay, you rock. And remember, whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make it loud. See you, gang.